Hello and welcome to a new edition of The Big Picture, the show where we try to take you beyond the news to understand the processes that are driving news events and their implications. Last week, Parliament passed the Citizenship Amendment Act. This will allow religious minorities, non-Muslim minorities, please note, from 3 neighbouring countries to access expedited citizenship in India. The discussions in parliaments witnessed fierce debate. There were critics who said that this act undermines India's constitutional values. But the fiercest reaction that we have seen to this is in the Northeast. I'm joined by a very distinguished guest today to discuss the implications of the Citizenship Amendment Act as well as the response in the Northeast. Sanjoy Hazarika is a scholar, author of multiple books on the region, one of India's tallest public intellectuals. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us.
Thank you.
What's your broad response to the passage of the Citizenship Amendment Act and its provisions?
Well, the first thing is it's going to be challenged without a doubt in the Supreme Court. Its validity, its constitutionality, and above all, its justness. You know, like I have often said about the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, that it may be constitutional, but is it just? And the test of a law is justness and justice.
The argument of the government on the floor of the House was that this is actually a humane and just law because it is providing citizenship to those who are persecuted and those who have suffered in Pakistan, Bangladesh and Afghanistan. You don't buy that argument?
Well, what's the barometer for persecution? What is the indicator for persecution? Who decides who's persecuted, who's not? I met people in Hindu families in Bangladesh who are quite happy there. Some of their family members have come across to Calcutta and so on, but that was because of an economic reason. These were people who made the Tangail sari. So this is a family which is divided. One son went there, one son. This was just a few years ago. And yes, there have been incidents of violence against minority groups in Bangladesh as they've been here, as in other parts of the world. So that's one thing. The second thing is that if you just look at the way the issue has been presented in the Act, it is that people who suffered persecution in these countries, and the cutoff date is 31st December 2014. Now, the government has suddenly bent over backwards to say, oh, in Bangladesh it's different. We're not talking about current persecution, we're talking about what happened in the past under military regimes and other governments. Well, they seem to forget that this is until 2014. The act is until 2014. And the present regime, which they say has been very secular and accommodative of minority interests in Bangladesh, has been in power since 2009. So, you know, there is a contradiction at every place where you turn.
One of the arguments that the government has made is that this is a product of partition. Mm-hmm. We have often spoken about the implications of partition in India's west, in the Punjab, for instance. But the east suffered as much. Do you think this provision became necessary because of the natural cross-border flow of people in the east during post-47, but also in the run-up to the 71 war?
Well, there is both natural outflow and there is a forced outflow in the sense that what happened in 1970, the pogroms in what was then East Pakistan, leading to 10 million people crossing over into Assam, West Bengal, Tripura and so on. And then a large number of that flow going back. So there are many reasons why people cross. They don't cross necessarily because they're being persecuted or prosecuted. They also move because of economic reasons, for educational reasons, and also for environmental reasons. You are displaced, you move. And that happens within a country, it happens across borders. You know, the thing that I often ask is, it's not that one community is moving. Many communities move. Both Hindus and Muslims have moved out of East Pakistan, East Bengal and Bangladesh. And it's a pretty old you know, set of movements that have taken place. And if through this act you're basically saying that only these groups who have moved and who have faced persecution in these countries are entitled to citizenship, then you are changing the goalpost hugely, because 71 was the second partition, right? I mean, that was it was the birthing in blood of Bangladesh. And you have a situation where there is an agreement between the center and the state government and the Assam Students Union and the Assam Gana Parishad, which said in 1985 that anybody who came after 71 will be detected and expelled according to law, and keeping in view international commitments, international laws. It said all that in the preamble. So suddenly you say it's 2014 and only these 6 communities will benefit. Now that has basically got people very upset, because it comes at a time just after a very controversial citizenship process of the National Register of Citizens, which is also a citizenship process in Assam. It's a very simple thing. In Assam, perhaps not for India, the Citizenship Amendment Bill and the NRC are joined at the hip. Why is it? The NRC, whether it's a faulty process, it's there. It has not yet been taken to the Supreme Court by the Assam government to say, we reject this, Your Honours, we are going to do something else. We've been hearing statements on this. But the NRC basically said 1.9 million people were excluded. Now, majority of these people are Hindus.
So the CAB will give them a route back.
And then, so what one takes away, the other puts back, and that's where essentially
so you are
the
telling
party
us that in Assam the reaction has been so fierce because of 2 reasons. One, because the cutoff date has shifted from 71 to 2014, and the other because
you're legitimizing what was not legitimate before, no?
Yeah, and so you're
creating a new goalpost where it didn't exist.
And the second reason you are suggesting is because they see it as a package deal with NRC, which at the CAA now will enable those who were excluded to come back in. Yeah. Why has the reaction been fierce in other parts of the Northeast? I ask about Tripura first.
Well, again, there is concern. I think there is people are deeply offended by the fact that there hasn't been really the kind of public consultations that there should have been. There is also the fact that the CPM, which was in power for so many years, is not a spent force. So obviously there will be a reaction to it from their side.
But in many regions of the Northeast, the government has decided to introduce exemptions. So both states where there are inner line permit restrictions, which has now been extended to Manipur, besides the 3 original states of Nagaland, Arunachal and Mizoram, and 6 scheduled areas, which covers almost all of Meghalaya, also parts of Assam. These are exempted. The CAA will not apply to them. Then why the concern?
Because they don't see, because of what I said earlier, you're basically legitimizing, you're changing the goalposts, you're legitimizing what people do not accept. And there is a deep sense of being let down, because, you know, if you look at the way people have voted in Assam, even Tripura last year, in other states, even in Manipur, which had a fragmented, what do you call it, mandate, but then the BJP got the numbers. People consistently voted under the feeling, with the aspiration that the issue of migration, which the BJP leadership had targeted as their priority, would be something that would be tackled in a certain firm manner. Whether we like it or not, that was the aspiration, and they voted in large numbers. Now you're seeing that after 5 years, you don't really have much of a movement forward on that. And the government has gone on record as saying that they have the Bangladeshis have been assured that there will be no sort of push out into deportation, because there is no agreement.
So what's going to be the outcome of this if there is a nationwide NRC?
If there is a nationwide NRC, there are different issues on that, but the question is, you can't send people anywhere else. And see, when you talked about partition is very real for people in West Bengal and so on, to a little extent in Assam, but it's very real here. You know, the Delhi area, in North UP, Bihar and Punjab, especially Punjab, to some degree Haryana. But it's not a reality in other parts, it's not a lived reality in other parts of the country, not in the South. With the powerful writings of Manto, of everybody, Urvashi Bhutalia, all these people, it comes from experience which is stained with blood, and it is what nobody wants to go through that again.
Looking forward, we are witnessing continued protests. How do you see this playing out? The centre has taken a firm stand. The act is passed. What is now going to be a way to reconcile the grievances of many of these regions, particularly the Northeast, with what the centre has already decided?
Well, from my perspective, you have to continue a peaceful protest, scientific, strategic satyagraha, using digital technology and social media to really conduct your conversations, your engagement, your opposition. It has to be democratic and it has to be peaceful. That's one. From the government side, they cannot just say that, it's calmed down, after a week things are going to be okay. No, because you're giving an opportunity, if you don't address the issue, for it to veer to a much more radical situation. So keep the doors of negotiations open, keep the windows of dialogue open, talk to everybody. People should go there. I think one of the mistakes which is done in this time was to assume that people will just accept this. Without a protest, without a whimper of protest. The last time there was engagement through the Joint Parliamentary Committee, but this time there hasn't been. And to drive an agenda, it doesn't mean that you don't have consultations. And consultation with one group or a few MPs is not a consultation. You need to engage with all groups, and they can include artists, editors, creative people, professionals, lawyers. You need to bring everybody on board.
My final question is something that you actually began with. I'll return to that. Do you hope that the judiciary strikes this down?
I would hope that the judiciary will stand up for justice and justness, not just constitutionalism.
And that would be rendering this null and void?
I would think so.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hazarika, for joining us. Please join us for the next edition of The Big Picture.